The Aftermath of Us, Chapters 14 and 15. Chapter 14, New Year, New Desires. The week between Christmas and New Year's had always been Alara's favorite time of year. That magical suspended period when the world felt full of possibility and fresh starts. This year, with Marcus beside her and their wedding just 6 months away, that feeling was amplified tenfold. They'd spent Christmas morning in a blissful haze of wrapping paper and Leo's delighted squeals, followed by a quiet dinner with just the three of them. Marcus had surprised her with a delicate necklace that perfectly complemented her engagement ring, and she'd given him a leather-bound journal for his thoughts and dreams, something he'd mentioned wanting during one of their late-night conversations. But it was the gift they'd given each other after Leo was asleep that had truly taken her breath away. Marcus had led her to their bedroom, where he'd scattered rose petals across the bed and lit candles throughout the room. The sight had brought tears to her eyes, not just because of the romantic gesture, but because of what it represented. He'd planned this, thought about making their first Christmas together as an engaged couple special and memorable. "You didn't have to do all this," she'd whispered, but her voice had been thick with emotion. "I wanted to," he'd replied, pulling her into his arms. "I want every moment with you to be special." They'd made love with a tenderness that had left them both shaking, and afterward, as they lay tangled in the sheets surrounded by the soft glow of candlelight, Alara had felt like the luckiest woman in the world. Now, 3 days later, they were preparing for their first New Year's Eve together as a family. Sarah had volunteered to watch Leo for the evening, insisting that an engaged couple needed to celebrate properly. The plan was dinner at Marcus's favorite restaurant, followed by dancing at a jazz club downtown, their first real date night since the engagement. Alara stood in front of their bedroom mirror, adjusting the straps of the black dress she'd bought specifically for tonight. It was more daring than anything she'd worn in years, a sleek number that hugged her curves and ended just above her knees, with a neckline that was sophisticated but definitely attention-grabbing. "Wow," Marcus said from the doorway, his voice rough with appreciation. "You look too much?" she asked, suddenly uncertain. "Perfect," he finished, crossing the room to stand behind her. His hands settled on her waist, and she could see his reflection in the mirror, his eyes dark with desire. "Absolutely perfect." He pressed a kiss to the sensitive spot where her neck met her shoulder, and she felt a familiar heat pool low in her belly. His hands skimmed up her sides, and she leaned back against him, already feeling breathless. "We should go," she said, but made no move to step away from him. "We should," he agreed, but his mouth was trailing kisses along her neck, and his hands were doing things that made coherent thought difficult. "Sarah will be here soon," she tried again, but her voice came out as more of a sigh than a protest. 15 minutes, Marcus murmured against her skin, his hands finding the zipper at the back of her dress. "We can't mess up my hair," she said weakly, even as she tilted her head to give him better access to her neck. "I'll be careful," he promised. And then the zipper was sliding down and his hands were on her bare skin, and all thoughts of dinner reservations fled her mind. He turned her in his arms, his mouth finding hers in a kiss that was hungry and desperate. She could feel his need in the way his hands gripped her waist, in the way he pressed her back against the dresser, and it sent a thrill through her that had nothing to do with the physical pleasure and everything to do with being so completely desired. "I love you," he whispered against her lips, his hands mapping the curves of her body with reverent touches. "Show me," she breathed, echoing the words that had become their private code. And he did, with a passion that left them both breathless and clinging to each other. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard and grinning like teenagers, Alara caught sight of herself in the mirror and laughed. "My lipstick is completely gone," she said, reaching for her makeup bag. "Worth it," Marcus replied, straightening his tie with a satisfied smile. They made it to the restaurant with minutes to spare, and if the hostess noticed that Alara's lipstick was freshly applied and Marcus's hair was slightly mussed, she was too professional to comment. Dinner was perfect. Intimate conversation, excellent wine, and the kind of lingering looks that made Alara feel like they were the only two people in the world. The jazz club was dimly lit and sophisticated, with a small dance floor and a trio playing soft, sultry music. Marcus led her onto the floor, pulling her close as they swayed to the rhythm. The music was slow and romantic, and Alara felt like she was floating in his arms. "This is perfect," she said, her head resting on his shoulder. "It is," he agreed, his voice warm with contentment. "I can't believe this is our life now." "Believe it," she said, tilting her head to look at him. "We're really doing this. Getting married, building a life together, being a family." "Are you nervous?" he asked. "About the wedding, I mean." Alara considered the question. 6 months ago, the idea of marriage would have terrified her. After Mark's abandonment, she'd convinced herself that she was better off alone, that depending on someone else was just setting herself up for heartbreak. But with Marcus, everything felt different. "No," she said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "I'm not nervous at all. Excited, yes. Impatient, definitely, but not nervous." "Good," Marcus said, spinning her gently before pulling her back into his arms. "Because I can't wait to call you my wife." The words sent a thrill through her that had nothing to do with the wine and everything to do with the promise they represented. Mrs. Alara Chen. It had a nice ring to it. As midnight approached, they found themselves pressed close together on the dance floor, surrounded by other couples but feeling completely alone. The countdown began, and Marcus's hands framed her face as the crowd around them shouted the final numbers. 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year. His kiss was soft and sweet and full of promise, and when they broke apart, both of them were smiling. "Happy New Year, future Mrs. Chen," he said, his voice warm with love. "Happy New Year, future husband," she replied, and the words felt like magic on her tongue. They stayed until the club closed, dancing and talking and stealing kisses in the dim light. By the time they made it home, they were both giddy with wine and happiness, and the intoxicating feeling of being completely in love. Sarah had left a note saying Leo had been an angel and was fast asleep, and they tiptoed through the apartment like teenagers sneaking in past curfew. But once they reached their bedroom, all pretense of quiet disappeared. Marcus pressed her against the closed door, his mouth finding hers in a kiss that was hungry and desperate. The careful control they'd maintained all evening evaporated, replaced by a need that was almost overwhelming in its intensity. "I've been thinking about this all night," he said against her lips, his hands already working at the zipper of her dress. "Just tonight," she teased, but her voice was breathless with desire. "Every night," he admitted, and the honesty in his voice made her heart skip. "Every morning when I wake up next to you, every time you smile at me, every time you laugh at something Leo says, I think about touching you, about making love to you, about how lucky I am that you're mine." The dress pooled at her feet, and Marcus's sharp intake of breath made her feel powerful and beautiful and completely desired. His hands skimmed over her skin with reverent touches, and she arched into him, already lost to the sensations he was creating. They made love with a passion that was both familiar and new, their bodies moving together with the kind of perfect synchronization that came from truly knowing each other. Every touch was electric, every kiss a promise, every whispered endearment a declaration of forever. Afterward, as they lay tangled in the sheets, both breathing hard and grinning with satisfaction, Alara felt a contentment so complete it was almost overwhelming. "Best New Year's Eve ever," she said, her head pillowed on Marcus's chest. "The first of many," he replied, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. As they drifted off to sleep, wrapped in each other's arms in the certainty of their love, Alara felt like the new year was already off to the perfect start. Chapter 15. Wedding Fever. February brought with it a flurry of wedding planning that left Alara feeling simultaneously excited and overwhelmed. The venue was booked, a beautiful garden pavilion that would be perfect for their June ceremony. The dress had been chosen after 3 emotional shopping trips with Sarah and Amy, who had both cried when she'd emerged from the fitting room in the one. The flowers were ordered, the photographer hired, and the caterer selected after a delicious tasting that had left them all slightly tipsy on champagne. But it was the smaller details that were driving her crazy, the seating charts and menu cards and the 1,000 tiny decisions that seemed to multiply every day. Marcus had been wonderfully supportive, taking on tasks like booking the band and organizing the bachelor party, but there were some things that required her input, and she was starting to feel the pressure. It didn't help that Leo had developed an obsession with the wedding, asking daily questions about when Marcus would officially become his daddy and whether he could wear his dinosaur tie to the ceremony. His innocent excitement was adorable, but it also added another layer of complexity to an already complicated event. "I think I'm losing my mind," Alara confessed to Sarah over coffee one Saturday morning while Leo played at the nearby playground. "Yesterday, I spent 2 hours debating the difference between ivory and cream napkins. 2 hours, Sarah, of my life that I'll never get back." Sarah laughed, stirring her latte with amusement. "Welcome to wedding planning. It's like temporary insanity, but with better flowers." "How did you stay sane when you planned yours?" Alara asked, watching Leo navigate the monkey bars with determined concentration. "Who says I stayed sane? I had a complete meltdown over centerpieces 3 weeks before the wedding. Tom found me crying in the craft store because I couldn't decide between roses and peonies." "That's not helping," Alara said, but she was smiling. "The point is, it all worked out. The wedding was beautiful, and 5 years later, I can't even remember what flowers we ended up using. What I remember is how happy I was, how perfect Tom looked waiting for me at the altar, how right everything felt." Alara felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. "You're right. I'm getting caught up in the details and forgetting what this is really about. Which is marrying the man I love and making our family official." "Exactly. Everything else is just pretty decoration." That evening, Alara shared her conversation with Marcus as they cleaned up after dinner. Leo was in the living room, building an elaborate dinosaur habitat out of blocks and providing running commentary on the social dynamics of prehistoric creatures. "Sarah's right," Marcus said, wrapping his arms around her from behind as she loaded the dishwasher. "The only thing that matters is that we'll be married at the end of the day. Everything else is just bonus." "I know," Alara said, leaning back against him. "I just want it to be perfect. For us, for Leo, for our families." "It will be perfect because we'll be together," Marcus said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "But if you want to elope to Vegas tomorrow, I'm game." Alara laughed, turning in his arms to face him. "Don't tempt me. Though I have to admit the idea of avoiding seating charts is appealing." "We could get married by an Elvis impersonator," Marcus suggested with a grin. "Leo would love that." "Don't give him ideas," Alara said, but she was smiling. "He's already planning to walk me down the aisle because Mama doesn't have a daddy to do it." Marcus's expression softened. "He's incredible. We're so lucky." "We are," she agreed, standing on her tiptoes to kiss him. The kiss started sweet but quickly deepened. Months of passion and the stress of wedding planning combining to create a need that was almost desperate in its intensity. Marcus's hands tangled in her hair, and she could feel his body responding to her closeness. "Leo's in the living room," she whispered against his lips, but she made no move to step away. "I know," Marcus replied, his mouth finding the sensitive spot on her neck that made her knees weak. "We'll have to be quiet." The challenge of staying silent only added to the excitement. Marcus lifted her onto the kitchen counter, his hands gentle but urgent as he pushed up her sweater. The cool granite against her skin was a stark contrast to the heat of his touch, and she had to bite back a moan as his mouth found hers again. They moved together with the desperate quiet of lovers who had learned to steal moments, every touch deliberate and intense. Marcus's hands mapped every curve of her body like he was memorizing her, and Alara felt herself coming apart under his attention. "I love you," he whispered against her skin, his voice rough with emotion and desire. "I love you too," she breathed, her hands fisting in his shirt as waves of pleasure washed over her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard and grinning like teenagers who'd gotten away with something, they could hear Leo's voice from the living room, still narrating his dinosaur adventures. "Think he noticed?" Marcus asked, straightening his shirt with a satisfied smile. "I don't think he could hear anything over his own commentary," Alara replied, sliding down from the counter and smoothing her sweater. "But we should probably go check on him before he decides the kitchen is the perfect place for a T-Rex rampage." They found Leo exactly where they'd left him, surrounded by blocks and completely absorbed in his prehistoric world. He looked up when they entered, his face bright with excitement. Mama, Marcus! The Stegosaurus and the Triceratops are friends now, but the T-Rex is being mean because he's hungry. Maybe the T-Rex needs a snack, Marcus suggested, settling on the floor beside Leo. What do T-Rexes like to eat? Everything, Leo announced with delight. But mostly other dinosaurs. But we don't have other dinosaurs for snacks, so maybe he could have crackers? Crackers sound perfect, Alara said, grateful for the normalcy of the moment after the intensity of what had just happened in the kitchen. As she watched Marcus help Leo build a feeding station for the hungry T-Rex, she felt a familiar wave of contentment wash over her. This was their life. Stolen moments of passion, balanced with the beautiful chaos of raising a child together. It wasn't always easy, and it certainly wasn't always convenient, but it was theirs. Later that night, after Leo was asleep and they were curled up on the couch together, Marcus brought up something that had been on his mind. "I've been thinking about our honeymoon," he said, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her arm. "Oh?" Alara looked up at him with interest. They'd talked about taking a trip after the wedding, but the logistics of traveling with Leo had made planning complicated. "What if we did something different? Instead of going away for a week and leaving Leo with someone else, what if we planned a family honeymoon? Somewhere Leo would love, somewhere we could all make memories together." Alara felt her heart skip. The idea of a traditional honeymoon had appealed to her, but the thought of leaving Leo for a week so soon after the wedding had been causing her anxiety. This suggestion was perfect, romantic but inclusive, special but practical. "Where were you thinking?" she asked. "Disney World," Marcus said with a grin. "I know it's not exactly traditional, but think about it. Leo would be in heaven, we'd have plenty of opportunities for romance after he goes to sleep, and we'd be starting our marriage by doing something as a family." "That's," Alara paused, considering. "Actually brilliant." Leo would lose his mind with excitement. "And there's something romantic about the idea of starting our marriage in the most magical place on Earth," Marcus added. "Plus, I've always wanted to see Leo meet Mickey Mouse." Alara kissed him, pouring all her love and gratitude into the contact. "Have I mentioned lately that you're perfect?" "I'm not perfect," Marcus said, but he was smiling. "I'm just a man who's completely in love with his family." "Our family," Alara corrected softly. "Our family," he agreed, and the words felt like a promise. As they sat there planning their unconventional honeymoon, Alara felt the last of her wedding stress melt away. Sarah had been right. The details didn't matter. What mattered was that in 4 months, she would marry the man she loved, and they would officially become the family they'd already been in their hearts. Everything else was just pretty decoration.